All right, are we ready to go? All right, I got the thumbs up. Well, let's go. All right, my name's Chris Dias. I'm a program manager on the Visual Studio Code team. Thanks for coming today after lunch. We've got about 45 minutes to go through some really cool tips and tricks across the breadth of Visual Studio Code. We have a lot of stuff, about 10 things packed into 45 minutes, so about 4.5 minutes per section. But the first thing I want to make really clear in this session, this is not about Visual Studio, the IDE. It's about Visual Studio Code, the cross-platform editor. So if you want to see tips and tricks on Visual Studio, this is not the place to be. So if you want to get up and leave right now, it's okay. You won't hurt my feelings. Anybody? Nice. Excellent. All right. So we're going to go through tips and tricks. I'm going to show you 10, we'll call them stanzas, or different areas of the product that we're going to go and see some tips and tricks. And this slide deck is actually, I posted it up with the rest of the slides, so you can download it. And there's a bunch of links and tips and tricks in there, but we're not going to use the slide deck for this talk. Instead, we're going to use Visual Studio Code, because the first tip that I want to show you is how to do slides in markup. And so I've got an extension here in VS Code. It's called Reveal.js. And what Reveal.js does is it lets me create Markdown and then turn them into slides. So actually, let me back up one here. I'm not on the first slide. There it is. VS Code tips and tricks all in Markdown. I can come in here, and in fact, I can click on these, and we've got different themes that are going on. And this is just living in Markdown preview to the right-hand side of the editor. That's horrible. Let's go with solarized. So the 10 things that we're going to cover today. We'll cover some things about setup, and we'll configure your environment. We're going to set up key bindings to make it your own. We'll talk a little bit about code navigation, project navigation, workspace navigation, and editing of files. Setting yourself up for different styling rules and code correctness. We'll do some debugging. We'll do everything from single file debugging to Docker debugging. I'm going to show you how to loosely couple your tools through something we call tasks. Show you how to customize the terminal. That's for you, John Papa, to change your shell, which would be very cool. Some really interesting tips about source code control. And the last thing I'm going to do is show you how to create an extension. So all this is going to happen, hopefully, in about 45 minutes. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the version of VS Code that we're using. So who here does not have VS Code installed? All right, good. That's good. Oh, a couple of you guys. You start installing it right now, because it'll be done by the time we get to the second slide. But what I want you to do is not install what the stable version is. I want you to install something called Insiders. And so if you go to the big green download button in the upper right-hand corner and you scroll down a little bit, it says here, want new features sooner. Install the Insiders build. And the Insiders build is what I've installed on my machine. It's the same build that we all use to develop VS Code. And what's cool about it is it releases and updates every single day. And as a result of that, you actually get great new features before they're released to stable. For example, so I'm running the Insiders build right now, and I've got a folder open. And one of the big feature requests that we're working on is the ability to have multiple root folders. We call it multi-root workspaces. So then I can open up, let's say we'll add another folder to this workspace. My gosh, this font is small on my machine. Let's open up the VS Code. We'll open up the VS Code repository. We'll select that. Right? And so now what I have here in Insiders, I have the ability to have multiple root workspaces so I can create collections of projects and work on them side by side. So that's one of the great features that you get from using the Insiders build. Let me just remove this because we're not going to do that today. So that's one interesting thing about it. The other sort of interesting tip about setting up your product is the fact that VS Code actually ships in 9 languages. And if you want to go and configure the language that it's displayed in, you can just come in here and say language, configure language, and we'll open up this file called locale.json. Excuse me, air conditioning. And if you press Control Space here, it'll show you all the different languages that you could actually use. So if we said, hey, let's do French, and I do a hard restart of VS Code, and we come back in here, boom, our display language should be in French, explorateur, very good. So that's a very cool thing that you can do. Let me get back out of this because my French is really not that good. And the third thing that I wanted to talk about from a setup perspective, and this happens on the Mac, on Windows right away, but we really think that VS Code is meant to be used with a terminal, right? And so I want to be able to come in here and say to my VS Code Docker extension folder, I want to say, code insiders dot to open up that folder, but there's no code insiders found on the path. Well, instead of having to go figure out how to update your bash RC file, you can come up here to the command palette and just say path, install code insiders in the path. Once you do that, you don't even have to restart anything. We can come back here. Code insiders is now on the path. And so that's how you can quickly configure your app. Oops, I think I got 2 instances running there. You can quickly configure the app to be up and running in your preferred language and from the command line. So there's a couple quick tips and tricks about setup. So the second thing I want to do now that we've got the tool up and running is let's go and customize it, to make it work for me. And so what we're going to do is, first thing, of course, everybody loves to see is themes. So I'm going to open up the color themes. And VS Code comes with a number of themes that are sort of built in. There's either a dark base or a light base, right? So there's the Visual Studio default, dark default, high contrast theme, and the light default. And of course, there's other ones that I've got installed on my machine, and you can cycle through them. Ooh, red, wow, that's pretty good. But if you don't like any of these, you can actually come down here and say install additional color themes. And this will go out to the marketplace in the extension view, and it'll query for themes. And so we can say, what were you saying today, John? Hot dog? Is there a hot dog theme?
There is, unfortunately.
Wow, there is a. Wow. Let's try that out. We'll reload and see what hot dog theme looks like. This is a way to get rid of everybody in the room very, very quickly. Let's see, hot dog stand. Ooh, yeah, no, we're not going with that one today. But anyways, that's how you can go and quickly get a set of interesting themes. Let me go back to one that I like. Tomorrow Night Blue looks good. But not only can you customize the themes, you can also customize the icons that show up in the Explorer. Much in the same way, I can go up to Preferences, I can say File Icon Theme, and it'll bring up a quick pick list, which I can cycle through the different icon sets that we've got. So, minimal, you can just have just files and folders. SETI, which is the one that we ship with, which is a very nice set of icons. If you really want to go retro, you can go back to the Visual Studio Classic icons. Those are from like pre-2013, I saw up on the marketplace. And again, like the other icons or other themes, you can go and quickly click and search the marketplace and install additional sets of themes. And so there's one in here. VS Code Great Icons. If you come up here and search by or sort by install count, VS Code Icons, 3.3 million installs. This one has a number of different configurations for setting up file themes. So if you're interested in that, you want to customize it, go ahead and download that extension. All right, so that's how we can colorize the environment, make it sort of look and feel the way we want in that perspective. But really, there's a ton more settings. And I was just talking to John Pop over here earlier about some of the different settings that you can actually go and change. So what I did was I pressed Command, comma. And I'm on a Mac, and if you're on Windows, it's typically Control plus the key combination instead of Command plus the key combination. But Command, comma will simply just jump you right to the user settings file, right? And on the left-hand side, what we have is all of the possible settings that you can set for VS Code. And on the right-hand side is my set of settings that I have. And so these are some of the things that I've got on my machine. So the first one here is it's called update channel equals none. And because I'm on Insiders and because it updates every single night, what I didn't want to have happen was I get up this morning or we started this and then a new Insiders build came out and I had to restart right away. That's not something that I was interested in doing. So whenever I do a demo, I always shut off auto update of the tool. The next thing that I have on here is autosave, and I turn autosave on by default. And autosave is just this magical experience once you kind of get used to it. Of course, if you're doing something where every time you save a file, you kick off a process, maybe you don't want to do autosave as aggressively as possible. So what I have mine is set up is after a delay of 1 second, and whatever edits that I make to the file will automatically be persisted for me. So which means when I do things like this, which is the next setting, render indent guides, if I set this to false, you'll wait here in a second, you can see that this solid line will go away, and I didn't have to do anything to save that. So it becomes a very nice flow where you're kind of working on your app, hit F5, and everything is up to date. So there's render indent guides. If you saw render white space, I have mine set to all. And if we sort of zoom in here even greater, you can see what happens is on all, even in between words, you have a little bit of a white space rendering. So if that's not something that you want to do, you can actually set this to be something called boundary. Actually, we could just hit Control Space inside any of these settings, and you'll get a nice list with a description of what it will do. You can set it to boundary, and then it'll get rid of all of those white space markers in between words. So however you want to customize it, you can do it that way. The other cool thing that I have in here is something called font ligatures. And so if we have like a file, let me go and open up, what do we got? Super sorting right here. And I'm going to come in here and say if 5 equals 10. And you can see what happened here is I had this very cool triple equal sign. If I did something like equals equals, it's only 2 lines. If I say not equals, I get a nice slash to it. And this is something that's called a font ligature. And I can turn this on in my settings by setting this font ligature as true. And of course, what you need to have is a font installed on your machine that supports this. And so FiraCode Retina is one that does support it. And so it gives you this nice, pleasant experience when you're reading your code. So, so that's how you can kind of customize that experience. I have another setting in here for Minimap being enabled. I personally am not, I don't use the Minimap, and I feel like it kind of takes up a lot of space, so I have it off by default. But one of the things I wanted to show in here was the fact that it actually, I'm in a JSON file, but the Minimap is on. And that's because inside your settings, one of the things you can do is you can specify settings on a per file type basis. So what I'm saying here is I'm saying, look, for JSON files, I've got a set of different editor settings that I want to sort of override my global settings. And I've said that, yeah, I want to see Minimap in a JSON file, and I want to control the width of it. So I don't want it to be huge, right? The default is 120, and if I do that, it'll get larger. Oh, it's not going to get any larger because there's nothing in here. But I can control the size of it, right? I can make it as wide or as little as I want. So if you have settings you want to do it on a per file basis, I have another one in here which I think is interesting. When I write Markdown, I don't want to have the text completions being shown to me, so I kind of get rid of those. One last thing that I want to show in here is this workbench.tips.enabled equals false. And for me personally, on the splash screen on the desktop, by default you see a bunch of key bindings, and I don't actually like that on mine. I want a nice clean desktop, and so I actually turn that off. So I can, if you turn it back to true and you get back to the desktop, you can see, boom, there they're at. But I don't want those. So we'll shut that off again. Where did you go? Oh, there you go, false. Last thing in here, Explorer open editors visible equals 0. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, I just have the folder. I don't have the open editors work sash is what we call it. And I can come in here and I'm going to change this to 9, which is the default, and it'll open up on the left-hand side, which means that it'll show me up to 9 files. And there's 2 ways to sort of manage this sash over on the right-hand side. I can right-click on it, and I can say hide from status bar, and that will just basically hide it. And if I want to bring it back, I can right-click on the Explorer, and it'll show me everything that's available, and I can right-click and bring it back. Or I can come over here and sort of permanently disable it by setting open editors visible to 9. And then it will go away, and if you right-click and explore, it's not there. So those are some of the things that I do to customize my environment. So the next thing I want to do after customizations is talk about key bindings, which is another sort of thing to make VS Code my own. We can come back in here under Preferences. We'll go to Keyboard Shortcuts. All right, and so this is what we have. It's called it's our key binding editor, and I'll be first to admit we have some work to do here to make this a little bit more robust. But there's a bunch of things that I can do in here. One of my favorite commands is reload window. Right? So this just lists all of the commands throughout the entire environment. And reload window is one of them. And if I want to set up a key binding, you can see there is no key binding for it right now. I click on the plus. It's going to say, hey, what key combination do you want to use for this? And I'm going to say F6. When I do that, it's going to set up the key binding, F6. And now if I press F6, we'll reload the environment. Right? That's like if you ever get into a bind or something, just reload the environment. Everything comes up fresh. So if we come back here, we say reload. We can see it's F6. But I don't know if that conflicts with anything. I can right-click on it and say Show Conflicts. And that'll do a query and show me all the different places where F and 6 are used. Right? And so I can see it actually conflicts with pause when I'm running in debug mode. Well, if I'm in debug mode and I want to use F6 to pause, I don't want it to reload the window. I want it to actually pause. So we can fix this or make it only work outside of debug mode. And to do that, I'm going to go into the file called keybindings.json. And so whenever I customize one of my key bindings, it actually gets written out to this file, which is at my user level. And you can see in here, I've got the command F6 reload window. Well, let's make it that it only happens, and I'll use this when clause, when we're not in debug mode. Right? So now if I press F6, we'll reload the window. But if I come back over here to debug, actually I don't have a good application here, do I? Oh, I do. I have super sorting. Let's just go and we'll hit F5 on that. We're going to run this application really quickly. Oh, it didn't work. That's okay. Why didn't you work? Unexpected token. What did I do? Oh, I've got that code in there. Let's run this again. F5. We're in debug mode, right? And if I press F6 at this point, the environment does not reload because we're in debug mode. And I set up that key binding to be to block that out. All right, so we'll cover debugging in a little bit more, but I just want to show how you can configure your key bindings to work only in certain cases. But me going in here and setting up a key binding for everything under the sun is quite a bit of work. But what I can do actually is install something that we call a key map. If we come up here back to our preferences again and we say key map extensions, this will bring up the extensions viewer and it'll do a query for something, a category in the marketplace of extensions called key maps. And so if you're used to using Sublime or IntelliJ or Visual Studio or Eclipse, we've defined a set of key bindings which match your muscle memory of key combinations. For me, it's the old Visual Basic. F8 is really step, not F10. And so what you can do is you can install one of these and it'll remap the keyboard for you. And so we're going to go out on a limb here and we're going to install the Vim key binding extension or key map extension and reload this in the environment. And once we do that, let's go bring up a file. And who here is really good at Vim? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, no one, me neither. But once I've got this installed, right, J and K and L and H will move me around the file. Shift H will go up. And of course, everybody's favorite question on Stack Overflow is how do you get out of Vim? So if I hit escape and I hit colon, it'll actually bring up a command. I can say Q, and that'll close the file for me. But this is just how you can go out and get an extension, basically a pack of these key bindings, which will customize the environment to work really in the way that you want to do it, or that you're accustomed to. Now I have to get rid of that extension, or it's really going to mess us up for the rest of the demo. All right, we'll reload, and we're good to go there. Okay, so that's kind of key binding and customization of the environment. Let's kind of come down to the next level and start working with some folders. We'll do some navigation. I'm going to press the Control key and the R key. And what this is going to do is bring up a quick pick which shows me all of the workspaces that I've had open. And if I actually go down here, I open up a lot of workspaces. You get down here far enough, I'm holding down the R key and the key, I'm pressing that. Come down here, there's a bunch of files that I've had open in the past. But what this does is it lets me sort of quickly, oh, yeah, that does not exist. So it lets me quickly toggle between workspaces. So I can toggle, what are you doing? Don't save that, nope. Okay, so there's a sticker app. I can quickly toggle between that. Control R, I can go back to the Ignite folder, right? And so I can sort of quickly manage and move between different workspaces just by pressing Control R, and repeatedly pressing it will take me back and forth to these different workspaces. So I'm going to go back to Sticker App, which is a simple app that I'm going to use sort of for the rest of the conversation. So now that we've sort of managed, we understand how to move quickly between workspaces, let's talk about moving between files. So if I hold down the Command key and press P, what we're going to do is bring up Quick Pick again, and that's going to show me my recently opened files. And of course, if I hit Command P again, it'll move through them. And one thing that's interesting is while I'm here, if I press the right arrow, it will start to open up those files for me. So I can come in here and say index, open that one up, browse, open that one up, Docker debug, open that one up. And so what I can do is I can quickly look at the set of files that I've got recently and I hit the right arrow and I'll open them up and I'll create this sort of workspace of set of files that I want to go and work on. So Command P is very, very important, critical to your workflow. The other thing you see here in the command palette is type question mark to get help on the actions. If I do that, it's actually going to show you a set of commands that you can do. This is kind of the Uber window where you can do just about anything. Go to Files, what we just did. Go to Symbol. If I have symbols across the workspace, I can navigate that way. Running commands, so I can go and see all the commands in the environment are listed here. Other cool things that I can do, I can get quick access to debug things. If I go to View, it'll actually show me all the different viewlets, so I can switch over to the debug viewlet if I want to. So it's a very quick way to go and navigate around the environment without taking your hands off the keyboard. And so it's something to go and sort of play with and figure out the way that you want to work with it. So now that I'm within a file here, of course I can press Command Control 1, and that will take me to the first file in the tab well. Let's say I want to navigate inside this file. I'm going to bring up the command palette again, Command P, and I'm going to do an @ sign. And what the @ sign is going to do is going to give me all the symbols that are in the file. And then when I do that, you can see behind there, I'm actually navigating through the file. If I do a @ sign with a colon, it'll actually group these into functions and variables. It's not a very interesting file, but it'll group, in a richer file, the classes and all sorts of stuff that'll group it. And so you have a much easier way to sort of navigate through your file. So that's a quick way to sort of navigate your folders through your files down into the file itself. So now that we're in the file, let's talk a little bit about editing. Again, the first thing that I want to talk about or show you is there's a thing here called the interactive playground. And it's on the help menu. And what the interactive playground does is it actually gives you a nice overview of all of the different editing experiences that we have in VS Code. One big one being multi-cursor editing. And because this is actually a live editor in this document, you could come in here and you can actually do the tasks that it's showing you, right? So I can do multi-cursor editing right in this interactive playground. So for a quick overview, go there. But if we come back over here into our code, I'll show it to you in a little bit of a richer way. So of course, multi-cursor is what everybody loves and craves because it's cool once you sort of figure it out. So what I can do is I can come here and I put the cursor on the beginning of line 3. I'll hold down the Command key and keep pressing or clicking on different lines, and I'm setting up multiple cursors on those lines. And of course, I can come in here and we say, well, we don't want constants. We can say we'll change those to let. Right? Nobody really wants to do that. We can come back. We'll say constants again. And then I could do something like go to the end of the line, and then we can come back here and say, this is a comment. Right? And so it's very easy to sort of go and quickly set up multiple cursors throughout the file. But it's a little manual to sit there and kind of click, and I don't really like to do it that way. So what I like, my new favorite key combination is if I put the cursor over here on app, you can see we highlight all instances of that. And what I can do is also press Command D, and that'll create a cursor on that. If I press it again, it'll go to the next one and create multiple cursors across those. So I'm just constantly pressing Command D, and I can come in here, and now I can say, my app, right? But, that's kind of ugly, app. And I didn't get all of them, and it was a little bit, tedious to go through all of them. Instead, what I can do is I can put the cursor there, and if I hit Shift Command L, that will put a cursor on every instance that it's found inside the document. Right? And so now I can say this is my app, right? Across the entire board. But of course, that's a textual replacement, right? It's just searching for the app string. What we really want to do is a rename refactoring. So if we come up here to where app is defined, I can put the cursor on there. I can press F2 and bring up a rename action, and we'll change this to my app. Right? And that will do a symbolic rename across the entire file, so I know that it's actually correct at the end of the day. All right, so you can do multiple cursors. You can do rename refactoring. Another couple of cool things that we can do in here, like line methods. If I hold down the Shift and the Alt key and press down arrow, you're going to duplicate lines. And if I hold down just the Alt key, I can move these lines around very, very quickly. So we don't need all of those. We'll comment those out. But one thing that's very interesting about this, or we'll delete them, sorry, is if I move a line around, so if I'm on console.log, and I hold down the Alt key and move up and down, it'll actually do the proper formatting for me inside of the structure that I'm in that file. And pasting will work that way as well. There's even an option to say format on type, so when you hit the end of the line, it'll do the proper indenting and all that goodness. So lots of cool things that you can do from a line mode. And of course, the other favorite I have is if I select a bunch of lines and I hold down the Command key and hit the slash, it'll comment out that block of code, and I can toggle back and forth. And it's smart enough to know based on the file type, so if I'm in CSS or HTML, I'll put in the right block comments for that. So that's goodness. So that's kind of some rich editing experiences throughout the file. The next thing I want to do is sort of talk about navigation through this file. So one thing that's cool is if I come over here and I hover on my app, I'm going to get a little pop-up, and it's going to say constant my app is of type express. Now I'm in a plain JavaScript file. We actually use the TypeScript compiler in the background to compile JavaScript so we get richer understanding. So that's how we can figure out it's an express object. But if I hold down the Alt key and I hover over it, what we actually do is we give you a peek into where that thing is defined. So you can see the top line here is constant my app equals express. If I let it go, it's just showing me what the type is, and then I can get a peek into it. Of course, if I hold down the Alt key and click on it, I'm going to navigate to where that thing is defined. And it works pretty much across the board. If I hover over here, express, it's going to show me what the definition of express is. If I come over here to a route or a require statement, I can see this is defined over in browse.js, which is in another file, and I can click on it, and we will actually navigate to that file. So this is just holding down the Alt key and moving around with the cursor and hovering and moving around. So very quick, you can start to navigate around the entire workspace. If I come down here to router and I say find all references, we'll actually show you every reference to this particular symbol throughout the entire workspace. And of course, this depends on the language and the project that you're using. So the richer languages like Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, C# will give you this capability. If it's sort of a less known language that doesn't have a full experience or extension for it, you probably won't get the full experience. But from here, what I can do is I can see every place that it's referenced back over here in index.server. If I click on it, I can kind of see a quick text around where it is, and we can jump back over to that particular file, hit escape, and that'll go away. So it's a very quick way to sort of start to navigate and understand what's going on inside your app. The last thing I want to talk about from a navigation perspective is navigating through errors. And so if I press F8 here, well, I don't actually have any errors in this file, but we can go and create an error, and we'll just call this myapp222. Well, that's not going to create an error because it's JavaScript, right? So what I need actually is to create some errors in this file. And so, like I said before, since we're using TypeScript as the engine to drive our language experience for JavaScript, I can come in here at the top of this file and say, hey, you know what? VS Code, please tell TypeScript to start type checking this particular source file. And once I do that, it's going to turn on the TypeScript compiler for us, and it's going to start to give us some more information. So I put in a 222 here. It goes, hey, wait a minute, I don't know what this symbol is. And like we were trying to do before, if I press F8, I can then start to navigate around the errors in my file. And it's pretty smart. If I come in here and I say, you know, let message equal hi, John, and then I say message equals 10, I'm going to get another error in here that I keep pressing F8. You know, 10 is not assignable to a string. It understands that it's a number, and it's we're trying to assign it to a string. Well, there may be cases where I am smarter than the TypeScript compiler and Anders Heilsberg, where I think, you know what, no, I really know that I want to set message to 10, and I can come in here and click on the light bulb and say I want to ignore this error. And what it will do is it will insert another directive in here. It says tsignore. It says, I know what I'm doing. Don't give me error checking on this particular, the next following line. So what I can do is I can, over time, start to turn on type checking and get a richer experience and start to get more correct code throughout my workspace. All right, so let's clean this up a little bit because it'll probably mess us up later. We'll clean this out. All right, so now what we've done is we've done some editing, navigation. We found some errors. But one of the things that we haven't done is really, like, there's compiler errors and there's also style errors, and that's typically linting. And in this workspace, we have an ESLint RC JSON file. And what this does is it tells this tool ESLint how I want to have my source code linted. It has a bunch of rules set up. And what we can do is we can go over here to the extension view. We can turn on or look for an extension for ESLint, and it's right there. We'll install that. You can see it's 2 million downloads, so it's a very popular extension. And we'll reload the environment to load up that extension, and it'll figure out that that ESLint RC file is there. And now if we do something like, let's put a few cursors in here, and we're going to add some trailing spaces to these lines, we get another set of errors in here. And this is ESLint that's actually kicking in and linting our source code for us, right? And so one of the rules set up that there's no trailing spaces, and of course, like a lot of these tools have that you install, there's a little light bulb that will actually go and fix things. So I can say fix this particular one, or I can fix all no trailing spaces throughout this file, and the ESLint extension will go and actually remove all the trailing white spaces. And if you really don't want trailing white spaces, there's a setting for the editor so that every time you save a file, all the trailing white spaces will be removed on save. So you can control it that way as well. All right, so that's kind of linting. The last thing I want to talk about sort of in your code is formatting, right? And so if I come in here and let's just tab this over a little bit, I should get some nice ESLint errors. But if I right click, and of course in here, I can do a format document, right? And that'll do the formatting for me. Now, a lot of language extensions will have formatting built in, but there are some by default that we don't have. So I've got an SVG file in here, that's the VS Code SVG, and this really comes up as an XML file. And if you've ever read SVG files, they're pretty deep. But if I right-click on here, there's no formatting, right? So again, what we can do is we can go back to the marketplace. We can search for XML in this case, or we can search for formatters. And we'll install the XML tooling, which is another very popular extension. And once I do that and quickly reload the environment, I can go back to my SVG, and if I right-click on it, now we have a format document command. And that will go and actually do XML formatting on my SVG and make it much easier for me to read. So you can do style linting, you can do formatting, you can do navigation, you can do error checking, all these things you can do in the file across your workspace with just a couple of quick extensions. All right, so the next section that I want to move on to, we've got 15 minutes left, is debugging. And we saw this application earlier. Well, we didn't see this one running, but let's run this application. The startup file in here is index.js. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press F5. And it's going to say, hey, what kind of environment is this? I'm going to say, well, I know it's a Node application. And it's just going to run the app. It's going to tell me that it's listening on port 3000. And if I go to the browser, I say localhost 3000. Boom, there's my app. And this is like a little sticker app. The thinking is you could go online, you could actually buy a sticker. But it's a simple Node React application. Let's kind of see what we can do from a debugging perspective. So first things first, I debugged. I didn't have to set up, I didn't have to configure anything. It just understood the fact that there was a JavaScript file there and it wanted to run it. And that just happened to be my application. But what I can do is I can start to configure the tool to tell it more about the application. And to do that, over in the debug view, you can see up here there's a gear with a little red dot, and the red dot indicates that there's no configuration. When I click on it, I'll get that link again for Node.js, and it's going to create a file called launch.json. And launch.json will let me configure the tool and tell it how I want to debug or launch this particular application. So in this case, one thing that you can see down here in the debug console, it said launch configuration created on package.json. So these launch configurations look inside your project and try to figure out what's going on. So this one looked in package.json and said, hey, it's a Node app, it's listening on port 3000. I'll do, the startup file is index.js, and it configures it for me. But I could go in here and let's say, I want to say, all right, what are my environment? I want to pass in environment variables, and I can say, Node environment is development, right? So I can control development. So I can control how the environment gets started up when I start to debug this application. If you look over here on the right-hand side, we've got this big button called Add Configuration. And if you click on it, you can start to add additional configurations to the launch.json to set up different sort of debugging environments. And I think an interesting one is this. I can set up debugging of a gulp task, right? We've got a gulp file in here. Let me open that up, the gulp file. And it has just tons and tons of tasks in here, right? There's build clean font, build clean HTML. And I could come over to the terminal, or my terminal, this one, I could say gulp, and I have to remember what the task is. But let's just say that there's one in here that's not working quite correctly. It's the populate MongoDB one, the first one in here. I can actually set a breakpoint there. And I'm going to configure the tool to run gulp and run that populate MongoDB task inside my gulp file, right? So I'm saying, hey, please use Node to go run gulp, and this is the task that I want you to run. So when I come back over here from the picker and I say, this is the configuration I want to run, and press play, what will happen is we'll invoke that gulp task, and I break over in my gulp file. Now this isn't my application. My app is not running. I didn't start it. If I come back over here and refresh the browser, it's not running. It's not there because I'm debugging another part of my application. And as expected, I can step into, step over, and do everything that you kind of expect in debugging. So that's cool. That's how I can sort of start to set up debugging for my app, different parts of my app. Let's see what else we can do in here. I've got a Chrome extension, Chrome debugger installed, so I can choose the Chrome launch to let me debug the client side of my application. And so we know that the app listens on port 3000. And if we tell VS Code to start this particular configuration, launch Chrome, what will happen is it's going to start up a deployment instance or a development instance of Chrome, browse localhost 3000, but nothing's going to happen because we didn't start the server, right? So I can go to the server, and there's an npm script in this app which will basically just load up the server, which I understand. And if I come back over here and reload the app, boom, there we are. I've got this running in the browser. But this means I can come over into VS Code, and much like I debugged the client's, the server side of things, now I can start to debug the client side. So if we go into roots, we go into browse, and we'll put a breakpoint on our React line, and we refresh this page, we're going to break over in VS Code. So that means I can do client-side debugging. I don't have to use the Chrome tools if I don't want to. There's extensions for Edge, the Edge browser, that you can plug in as well. So that's a very easy way to sort of do both client and server debugging. But it kind of stunk that I had to go over here and start my server. So I'm going to break out of the server, and I'm willing to bet that I can come up with a way to do both of these at the same time. So I'm going to go to the top of my launch.json, I'm going to hit Control Space, and there's another section that you can add. It's called compounds. And what this does is lets me set up multiple debug sessions at the same time. So I can say launch program, which is the first one that we created, and I want to do launch Chrome, which is the second one or the third one that we created. And now when we come in here and we choose compound debugging and we hit play, what's going to happen is the server is started up for me automatically, and the browser is started up. And we'll hit that where some timing issues. And now what I can do is I can debug both the client and the server side of my application at the same time from within VS Code. So that's very cool. The last thing I want to show you here from a configuration perspective, I think this is probably the most interesting part, is attaching to a remote program. And what I want to do is actually go and debug a Docker container. So we're going to say attach to remote. We're going to run this Docker container on localhost. And we need an absolute path to where the contents in the container live. And the best way to find that is to open up the Docker file and see where we actually put it. So in the Docker file, we put the sources, or the app is living in user source app. I'm going to copy that out. I'm going to go back to launch.json and say that's the place to go find the sources in the container. And then we're going to go launch this thing. So we'll say Docker. I have a Docker extension installed, Docker compose up, and it'll launch the Docker application. For me. It's running on 3000. The debug port is 2299. And just like we did before, we'll change our configuration to attach to remote. And we'll browse to that. And you can see we've got a little attach icon up here now. And if I come back and I run the app again, this is actually running in the container. And the reason you can tell it's running in the oh, no, actually, I have it set up right. But that one's actually running in the container. I was surprised that the data actually showed up, but I have an environment variable set up. And of course, I can come back over to VS Code. And if we go back to our roots on the server, where are we? Browse. And we put a breakpoint back in here and refresh the browser. We will break over here. But this is debugging in the running Docker container. So very powerful things you can do with launch.json and very quickly. All right, next thing I want to do, we only have 7 minutes left. Oh my God, this is going to be quick. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the command palette. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to type in task. Now, task is when we think of a task as a way to sort of loosely integrate all your existing tools into VS Code without making you rewrite and do everything. So when I go in here and I say task space, what happens is VS Code looks throughout your workspace and says, hey, is there a gulp file? Is there npm? And a couple of other things. It says, let me go and sort of create tasks out of all these things. And so you can see here, everything that was in my gulp file actually shows up as a command that I can go and run. So I could say, gulp populate MongoDB, and it'll ask me if it wants to scan the output, and it's just going to run it for me. So that's cool, because I don't even have to go and run it from the terminal. I can just do it quickly from the command palette. And if I don't like how that sort of works, I can actually come in here, much like I can with a launch.json, I can configure how VS Code is going to run this. So we can go npm install, and we'll click on the little gear on the right-hand side, and this will create the task.json for me. And what I can do is, I don't need a problem matcher for this one, but what I can do is I can come in here and say, hey, how do I want to run this particular thing? Let's say, we'll call, oops, sorry. Oh. We'll say that we want the label to be, my cool task. And then if we bring up the command palette again and type in task, you can see now it says my cool task up there. And let's say I want to give it, a name, a real name. We'll call it, we'll say the identifier is npm install. Right? So now I've sort of said this is a particular task. Because what's interesting about this is not going to the command palette and running it, but actually binding it to a key so that you can run it sort of quickly. And so much like we did before, I can come in here to my key bindings, And I can look for run task, which is to run a particular task. Where are you? Where are you? It's hard to see with this. Here we go, run task, right? And we're going to say, yes, we want to do that one. And we're going to do the key binding Command N, Command I. And once we do that, when I run Command N, Command I, it actually brings up the task to go and run. But it's not running the one that I want to run, so we have to give it a little bit more customization like we did earlier. So we can come down here. Here's Command N, Command I. And if we go to the end of the line here, and we say the args, or what the thing is that we want it to actually run, which is that identifier, which we called it npm install. Right? We said, hey, the name of this thing to run is npm install. And I also only want to run it in certain cases. So I can say when resource file name equals package.json. So what this says is I only want this command to be bound to this key when I have a package.json file open, because command N actually does a new file, right? And I'm not in a package.json right now. But if I bring up my package.json, and I run Command N, Command I, it'll actually invoke that task for me. All right, so that's how I can configure a set of tasks to run for me, set them up to a key combination so I can quickly get access to it. All right, so those are tasks. We've got 4 minutes left. I am going to make it through our 10 things. The next thing I want to show you is a little bit of configuration on the terminal. We've seen the terminal here a few times. We've got a number of them, and I'm going to delete them. And when I do Control-Tick, it opens up my default shell, which is a bash shell. And I was talking to John Popper earlier, and he actually wants to run a different shell. So one of the things you can do is you can come in here to your settings, and I've got it down here at the bottom, and it's commented out, actually. I can come in here, and I can say, you know what, I actually want the integrated shell, in this case on the Mac, to be the Z shell. If it's on Windows, I can say, hey, I want it to be PowerShell, whatever it is. And then once I do that and I go create new shells, I actually get the Z shell instead of the bash shell. So that's pretty cool. I can come back up on the command palette. You see the pattern here. I can come to the command palette. I can enumerate all of them. I can actually come in and rename them if I want. I said, this is my, my test shell. And then it'll change it so you have a better idea. You don't have just Z shell, Z shell, Z shell, bash, or whatever listed in your task. But the last cool thing about the terminal that I want to show is you can actually just run commands or files in the terminal itself. And so what I can do, I can come in here, and I'm going to go up to the command palette. I'm going to say terminal, run the active file. So I've got a shell script here. I'm going to run the active file in the terminal. And when I do that, I'm going to do the cool matrix outline. All right? So it's a very performant shell. You can do all sorts of fun things like this. All right, we're going to close that down. All right, 2 more things in my 2.5 minutes. The next thing is source code control. One of the things that we've added recently is the ability to have additional source code control providers. By default, VS Code ships with Git as the source code control provider, but if you're using TFS or VSTF, you can install the extension and it'll support that. Perfirst, Mercurial, Subversion, so those all exist for you today. And you can just go to this very long overflow menu and install them. From here, over the overflow menu, and install additional SCM providers. Now, a few other cool things that have gone on that you can do here. Well, I've added a bunch of comments. So I can see my diff view side by side. If I don't like side by side, if you look at this overview menu, I can say switch to inline view, and it'll show me inline view if I prefer it that way. I can also come in here and press F7. And what that'll do is give me a condensed view of my diffs. And we actually did this to support screen readers on Windows and NVDA. And what happens is a screen reader will come up here and it'll say, hey, this is change 1 of 3, 2 of 3 as you navigate through it. Because for a screen reader, seeing a side-by-side diff actually doesn't make any sense at all. So we did a bunch of work to make that experience much nicer. So that's very cool. The other thing you can do from the context menu is if you just select like a few of the lines that we've changed. So let's just select these 3. I can come up to the overflow context menu and I can say stage selected ranges. And what that'll do is just stage that set of code that I want, that I look at my diff, and then I can commit that back to the repository. Now, the last thing I want to talk about from a source code control perspective, you may have seen this throughout the demo. So let's go back over here to, let's see, index.json or index.javascript. You can see over here in very fine print, Nick Molnar 6 months ago, as I move around from line to line, Chris Dias 2 hours ago. This is sort of git blame built in. And I've got an extension, it's called git lens. And this is an amazing, amazing extension if you're doing Git. And it'll show you git blame. If I hover over something, I can quickly jump to the commit. If I come in here and click on the Git icon, it'll show me the whole side-by-side blame, so I can see the entire history of my file right in the environment. So I strongly encourage you to go and check out the Git blame extension. The last thing I want to show you is something about extensions. One more extension that I think is really fun and cool, and it's a great way to end this demo because I have 0 seconds left. But I'm going to go look for this extension. It's called Power Mode. Where is it? Come on, Power Mode. Oh, I have it installed. I'm just going to enable Power Mode always. I'm going to reload the environment. And I'm going to bring up this one last file in here. I think it's called Welcome. Oh, no, thank you. That's the end. Thank you, Markdown. And we'll make this a little bit bigger because it's so much fun. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Please write good evals. That's the end of my talk. Tips and tricks. Thank you.